second session, and thank you, Steve, for all of your great help here. Okay, so we're going to start here with Quartet 2, East Coca, and where Eliot continues this Platonic conflict between eternity and time, and its illusory nature, the transcendent paradox of time and timelessness, the redemption it carries. And he deepens the discourse to ground what's truly real and what has merely the appearance of reality. And Eliot goes deeper into the theme of time, how it shows up in pattern, movement, rhythm, dancing, seasons, history, the turning of creation and destruction, birth and death, rebirth. And we begin to get the core of the matter, the loss of personal freedom that he's speaking about, the fulfillment, connection to cycles of nature, and the reliance upon dead knowledge versus the aliveness of the living moment day to day, aware of creative and spiritual freedom. And he also looks here at how we stay in accumulated, essentially dead knowledge, which falsifies and obscures and obstructs, versus the less obvious reality that existence is a state of eternally becoming, evolving, transformation, as in nature. Becoming, and he is positing that this enables us to become authentically who we are, vibrant, alive with possibility in every moment of our lives. We all want that. So let me start with the first quartet, the first movement, sorry. Okay. In my beginning is my end. In succession, houses rise and fall, crumble, are extended, are removed, destroyed, restored, or in their place is an open field or a factory or a bypass. Old stone to new building, old timber to new fires, old fires to ashes, and ashes to the earth, which is already flesh, fur, and feces, bone of man and beast, cornstalk and leaf. Houses live and die. There is a time for building and a time for living and a time for generation and a time for the wind to break the loosened pane and to shake the wainscot where the field mouse trots and to shake the tattered arras woven with a silent motto. In my beginning is my end. Now the light falls across an open field, leaving the deep lane shuttered with branches, dark in the afternoon, where you lean against a bank while a van passes, and the deep lane insists on the direction into the village, in the electric heat, hypnotized. In a warm haze, the sultry light is absorbed, not refracted, by grey stone. The dahlias sleep in the empty silence, wait for the early owl. In that open field, if you do not come too close, on a summer midnight, you can hear the music of the weak pipe and the little drum and see them dancing around the bonfire, the association of man and woman in dancing, signifying matrimony, a dignified and commodious sacrament. Two and two, necessary conjunction, holding each other by the hand or the arm, which betokeneth concord. Round and round the fire, leaping through the flames, or joined in circles, rustically solemn or in rustic laughter, lifting heavy feet in clumsy shoes, earth feet, loam feet, lifted in country mirth, mirth of those long since under earth, nourishing the corn. Keeping time, keeping the rhythm in their dancing as in their living, in the living seasons. the time of the seasons and the constellations, the time of the milking and the time of harvest, the time of the coupling of man and woman and that of beasts, feet rising and falling, eating and drinking, dung and death. Dawn points and another day prepares for heat and silence. Out at sea, the dawn wind wrinkles and slides. I am here, or there, or elsewhere, in my beginning. Okay, so we'll open it up for the discussion here.
If anybody has any questions.
Yeah, please just feel free to just jump in and raise your hands. And, you know, there are a lot of poets, there are many poets and writers in this group who are very versed in a lot of what we're talking about. And it'd be good to hear from you.
Or if you'd like to just unmute. Oh, we have Elaine would like to ask a question.
Okay.
Yes, it's sort of a question. I'm wondering, was T.S. Eliot consciously using not only the rhythms, but some of the words of Ecclesiastes?
Yes, absolutely, yes, yes. And this poem was a huge innovation in meter and rhythm and time, you know, poetic time. He mixes different iambic rhythms, pentameter, tetrameter, various rhythms in free verse, which keeps it flowing. And this was an innovation at that time, you know, where poetry was sort of coming from traditional to modern. And also he mixes various poetic styles and meter and free verse and rhymed verse. So it's really a very innovative style that he created. Really, it was really a beginning of many different new directions in poetry. So so in all of these four quartets, he gives the sense that the speaker is trying to find some way into our minds to show us something striking at one place with a certain phrase, and then repeating his point with different phrasing and with different images in various stages of the poem. And he uses this repetition to excavate his themes from different angles and aspects, and extending the inquiry toward deeper understanding. And in this movement, Eliot traces the themes in the first quartet, in the same movement of the first quartet. And he moves from the abstract and begins to ground that out, those abstract concepts of Quartet 1 in history and biology and human experience and direct experience. And he also now acknowledges his own direct personal involvement in what he's talking about. So in East Cocoa, we're continuing this theme of time, this intertwined beginnings and endings, and the interdependent paradoxes of that. And he unpacks here also throughout this whole quartet, what he said in the first quartet: only through time is conquered. So this, as you pointed out, this first section is a clear reference to Ecclesiastes. And he expresses it here in buildings. you know, turn, 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 the seasons, decay, rot, decomposition, birth, a new life, change, living and dying, evolving, decaying in the same moment. And what he's pointing to, that this is true for us, he's really sort of trying to show us how true this is for us. And we resist it due to the illusion of stability. We want creative innovation and stability at time, you know, at the same time as human beings. And he's pointing this out as a kind of fertile fallacy and suggesting that we accept and embrace this paradox, which becomes a powerful lead-in to a more expressed life. And so, but we resist, we're afraid of change. But the truth of what he's saying is that selves are dying and becoming in every moment. There's nothing, it's not being, but becoming. And our human perception causes us to reify objects, you know, the way, literally the way optic nerves work. We reify objects in front of us. We don't see process. And what he's talking about here in many of these references is this rampant, joyous process of life, that if we can only see it, we can see it everywhere. We can see it in trees, rocks, grass, but you know, everything that we're looking at, we can see it. But we reify it. And actually, our optical process, we're constantly taking microsecond still shots of what we're seeing. So we are thrown to this reifying what we're seeing as objects, rather than an interactive process with life itself. So he's looking at time and patterns, the dancing, the seasons, the milking, the harvest, the constellations. And that's pointing to this whole thing of rhythm and dancing and patterns. He's tracing patterns, you know, in our everyday immediate reality, tracing it and connecting it out into the cosmos, as he did in the first quartet, when he was talking about, in the second part of the first quartet. And this is all conquered through time. So at the same time, he retains throughout this sort of more grounded explanation and of what he's talking about. He connects it to still at the same time to this philosophical expansiveness and the mysterious mood of wonderment that we had in Quartet 1. This remains throughout the work. And he's collapsing and layering time, interlarding past epochs with the present. And not only in our own experience and in history and in our experience of our lives, but literally in the soil, literally in the ground that we're walking upon. It's larded and layered. We're larded and layered with history. And he allows us to peek through his veil and feel within ourselves that intangible energy and emotion of these long past human experiences he's talking about, which he is saying are still resonant today. And in this way, Eliot allows us a glimpse of our own potential eternality, how that could be, how that could live. Just like the sound of the weak pipe or the live bird or the roses or the Chinese jar from Quartet 1, we're still moving, which is still moving in its stillness. We feel and experience this live stillness, literally, still life in objects, buildings, forests, oceans, nature, art, music, dance. So that's kind of a précis, an overview. Does anybody have any thoughts or suggestions or reflection on any of this?
Well, I don't see my hand up button. I don't see my hand up button, but my hand's up.
Hi, Walter.
Okay.
Hi, Walter. Good to see
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. You know, some of my hobby horses, one of them's free verse.
Yes.
And Eliot is famous for saying verse libre is neither.
Yes.
But I guess maybe, I don't know, that was before or after this?
I don't know. I think I don't know actually. Yeah.
And
It-
and there is free verse used in the four quartets,
Oh, yeah.
along with.
Yes. Yes, he mixes free verse, he mixes reflection, almost prose reflection, you know, in it.
Yeah,
As we
I think he did that in the Wasteland. I kind of wonder what, given the Eliot of the Wasteland,
yeah.
and now we've got the Eliot of this quartet,
Yes.
seems
Very
really
different,
to
a
be
very different Eliot.
very different. Seems to be taking everything back.
Well,
I mean,
do you know, at the time the time of writing this was between World War I and World War II, and during World War II, at which time he was also working, you know, rescuing the dead and the wounded in the Blitz in London. So it completely, I believe that experience is what really delivered this work as it
yeah,
stands today. And you know, he's reaching for resonance. He's reaching for salvation.
yeah. I mean, you know, it's almost as though he wrote, not that the Wasteland didn't make quite a hit. I should make such a hit.
Yeah.
It's never. But he also, you know, it was almost like a Harvard undergraduate coolness, and now you've got this incredible graveness and gravity of this.
And
A lot of change,
and
huge
emotional vulnerability.
Huge change.
He accessed his vulnerability and he accessed his courage. With that, you know, alongside of that, he accessed.
I mean, it's not every poet makes such a grand advance. I mean, this is a real advance for him. He's growing and getting.
Yes, yes.
What
And
makes it?
he declared this as the work of his life.
What makes it so great?
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I love this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Walter. Yes. By the way, everybody, Walter's a wonderful poet, as is Carol, who has a hand up. Carol Stone.
Well, I was just going to say, doesn't this, after the Wasteland, he wrote this, have a lot to do with his conversion and becoming an Anglican?
Yes, yes, I think so. And I think his conversion had a lot to do with, you know, what was happening. You know, it was the COVID of its era, right? You know.
Yeah.
But also he brings in a lot. I think he was searching everywhere. Because he brings in so many references to other disciplines, Buddhism, big time, the Vedic, you know, Vedic religions. You know, he really runs the gamut of transcendence, actually. You know? And it's a wonderful blend, actually, of East and West in this poem.
That's a good point. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody have anything else to say or any thoughts? And we could move on before we move on.
Well, we're going to get to Christian next. You just mentioned Buddhism.
Okay. Okay, so this is section 2. What is the late November doing with the disturbance of the spring, and creatures of the summer heat, and snowdrops writhing under feet, and hollyhocks that aim too high, red into gray and tumble down, late roses filled with early snow? Thunder rolled by the rolling stars simulates triumphal cars deployed in constellated wars. Scorpion fights against the sun until the sun and moon go down. Comets weep and Leonids fly, hunt the heavens and the plains, whirled in a vortex that shall bring the world to that destructive fire which burns before the ice cap rains. That was a way of putting it, not very satisfactory. A paraphrastic study in a worn-out poetical fashion, leaving one still with the intolerable wrestle with words and meanings. The poetry does not matter. It was not to start again what one had expected. What was to be the value of the long looked forward to, long hoped for calm, the autumnal serenity and the wisdom of age? Had they deceived us? Had they deceived us or deceived themselves, the quiet-voiced elders, bequeathing us merely a receipt for deceit? The serenity, only a deliberate habitude, the wisdom only the knowledge of dead secrets, useless in the darkness into which they peered or from which they turned their eyes. There is, it seems to us, at best, only a limited value in the knowledge derived from experience. The knowledge imposes a pattern and falsifies, for the pattern is new in every moment, and every moment is a new and shocking valuation of all we have been. We are only undeceived of that which deceiving could no longer harm. In the middle, not only in the middle of the way, but all the way, in a dark wood, in a bramble, on the edge of a grimpen where is no secure foothold, and menaced by monsters, fancy lights, risking enchantment. Do not let me hear of the wisdom of old men, but rather of their folly, their fear and frenzy, their fear of possession, of belonging to another, or to others, or to God. The only wisdom we can hope to acquire is the wisdom of humility. Humility is endless. The houses are all gone under the sea. The dancers are all gone under the hill. Okay. Well, that was a really it's a beautiful ending to that passage. So let's look at this this first poem here. First of all, it's tetrameter, which is 4 beats a line, which is it makes for a very speedy, sprightly, spring-like rhythm, right? In this poem about September, and it's mostly couplets, with some single triplets thrown in there. A, B, B, C, D, D, E, E, D, D, C, F, A, C, F. And he's got all these really arcane references in here. And what he's actually doing is he's bragging on himself, actually, and at the same time sort of copying to himself, to his chops, his poet's chops. But he's actually saying in this highly sly rhyme with slant rhyme couplets, he's revealing himself as the poet, as the man, in this poetic meter and free verse, copying to his poet's chops in this double meaning, very personal poem. And he's actually speaking about himself. He's actually speaking about he's at November, and he's got this disturbance of the spring himself, right? And so he I'll give you some of the meanings of some of these lines. Late November doing with the disturbance of the spring. And there's something prescient here about climate change, although it wasn't evident at all at that time. But he's collapsing the boundaries of youth and age here. What's the late November doing with the disturbance of the spring? And all of these summer plants are growing and dying in winter. They're emerging and dying in late autumn, early winter. And triumphal cars, so thunder rolled by the rolling stars. So he's talking about heavy thunderstorms of winter. Thunder rolled by the rolling stars simulates triumphal cars, which are carriages in military victory parades, like floats. Constellated wars, the wars between literally the planets and galaxies themselves. Scorpion fights against the sun, that's a constellation which comes up in November. The meteor, the Leonids, the meteor storms he's talking about, come in November. The hunter moon, hunt the heavens and the plains. The hunter moon comes in October and November. And this world in a vortex that shall bring the world to that destructive fire which burns before the ice cap rains. He's talking about the cycles, the million-year cycles, the hundreds of thousands of year cycles of the planet, of the Earth. So he's really taking these ideas of time and rhythms and patterns, you know, from the tiniest to the most broad. And then, so he goes from this brilliant, poetic, opulent, minimalist, abstract show-off poem, you know, poet's ego. And then he kind of tells on himself, you know, that was a way of putting it, not very satisfactory, a periphrastic study, which means unnecessarily long-winded in a worn-out poetical fashion. And actually, this is, in a way, what he's saying here in this first section is he's giving us sort of a masterclass on writing, you know, on the challenge of writing. He's talking about all that we have to go through when we're writing, you know, when we're trying to create something that's meaningful and worthwhile. And then we're looking at he's rethinking the experience of getting older. You know, this looked forward to reflective, calm, autumnal serenity. And he's criticizing the quiet-voiced elders. You know, the serenity, a deliberate habitude, you know, which is a kind of a torpor, you know, lack of energy. So the serenity is really just we got tired. They got tired. You know, the wisdom is just dead secrets, which you know, they're no longer generating anything very interesting. And these dead secrets are useless into what they're looking forward into. They're trying to bring the wisdom of the past into what they're looking into, and not seeing the wisdom of the new self that they're becoming. And so he's talking about experience really being useless in a way, because at every moment, it's this new and shocking valuation of all we've been, of the life that we're living and where we're going. And we're only undeceived of that which deceiving could no longer harm. You know, we only recognize and see it when it's no longer going to challenge who we are to ourselves, challenge our ego, challenge our sense of ourselves. And these references to the dark wood, the bramble, the grimpen, you know, these are all from various poems and literature. The dark wood, the grimpen, which means a bog, and the bramble, you know, the thorn, the rose and the briar, you know, and risking enchantment, risking actually second sight, risking new vision, perhaps transcendent vision, risking enchantment. And this contrasted with the folly of old men who just want to go to sleep. They don't want to have anything to do with anything. And the wisdom of humility. Humility is endless. And really, that's all he has to say. This is the spiritual culmination, really, of surrender to something, to freedom, really, from the false, inauthentic self that he's described in 3. The freedom from pain and separateness, the fear, the lack of trust in patterns and cycles of the earth, the universe, the cosmos. So that was kind of a long-winded paraphrastic study of that verse. Does anybody have any thoughts?
Pauline, can you hear me? It's Dee.
Yes, I can. Yeah.
So I think he's copying a plea here. Maybe that's not the right expression, actually.
Yes. He's copying to himself.
Well, no, that's not what I'm trying to say. So let me try again.
Yeah.
I think he has led us somewhere, but then he has not delivered the goods. Because as he ends this portion, maybe it'll come in the next 2 parts of this one.
Yeah.
But the only wisdom we can acquire is the wisdom of humility. Humility is endless. He has not set us up for that.
Yes.
I think he has not. I don't think he knows what he wanted to say here, and he just came up with another human concept to placate us, because this is not what this portion is about, in my opinion.
What is about, in your opinion?
So I believe he's trying to tell us that this concept of aging gracefully and gaining knowledge, as you called it, dead secrets, it doesn't get you where you want to go.
Yeah.
In fact, it's a brilliant, beautiful line where he says, bequeathing us merely a receipt for deceit.
Yes.
I think that could be, what do we call that? That turn, what's it called? That pivot, that something or other. Bequeathing us merely a receipt for deceit. So, okay, I can buy into that. So far he has me, I'm in agreement. And then he lambastes this, aging and experience and knowledge, and poses a pattern because it falsifies and it denies the newness of every moment. Okay, I can buy into that also. And that every moment is new and shocking. So, that's this time, this kind of being, valuation of all we have been. We are only undeceived of that which deceiving could no longer harm. That's too much for me to grab hold of right now. In the middle, not only in the middle of the way, but all the way in a dark wood, in the bramble, on the edge of the where there is no secure foothold, and menaced by mountains, risking enchantment, do not let me hear. So then he goes back to, don't don't assert that your elderliness is the place that we want to get to. Don't assert that, because that's not going to deliver the goods. That's what I hear him saying. Because in fact, as you get to this aging position, it's not the wisdom of old men, but rather their folly, their fear of fear and frenzy, their fear of possession, of belonging to another or to others or to God. But well, he doesn't actually complete that thought, unfortunately. So I see that's the problem. I think he does not complete that thought, and then he completely, takes a left turn and says the only wisdom we can hope for is the wisdom of humility. Humility is endless. So I just think, as I said, he copped a plea. I think he's not delivering for us here, and he can maybe restore my faith in what he's trying to communicate later on as we progress. But right now, I feel very disappointed because he's not articulating or giving me the message of what's really. This is just the wisdom of humility. Excuse me, that doesn't cut it from where he's led us to.
Well, so you don't see humility as wisdom?
The only wisdom we can hope to acquire. But it's coming from the left field.
I personally don't think so. I think that he's contrasting this to this life in the this life of automaticity, of driven by nonsense,
But then how does but how does humility doesn't address that? That's the point. He hasn't nailed it. That's all. It's nothing more I can sort of. And maybe it's in this one sentence which I can't understand, which is,
"We are only undeceived of that which deceiving could no longer harm."
Yeah, that I don't understand.
Yes.
Maybe that's where it is.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's the ego. We can't cop to what still troubles us about ourselves.
Undeceived of that which deceiving could no longer. I can't quite get there. But anyway, I mean, I send out this comment as a challenge because I don't believe he's led us there, and I think.
Okay, so let's the houses are all gone under the sea. The dances are all gone under hill.
Can somebody? I need to mute myself.
The reality of what they're gone. The houses are gone. The dances are gone. Sort of bowing to the largeness and the of life and beyond our own short lifetime. Okay, so anybody else have any and you know what, I think it might be resolved in the next poems, the next sections, but does anybody else have any thoughts on this or any questions or anything?
Yeah, I sort of do. Between the wars, there was a lot of attempting to blame old men for World War I. That they got us into it, and oh God, which really wasn't true at all. If you look back, it was the young men who were hot for war. In fact, some of the first battalions who came over, of Englishmen who came over the trenches to attack, were kicking a soccer ball in front of them in this exuberance. And it was the old men who were warning, oh, don't do it. Oh God, can't we stop it? So, but there was a lot of blaming, like T.S. Eliot, not T.S. Eliot, excuse me, Ezra Pound was blaming. I'm not sure this is this. This sounds, I don't see, I couldn't say it.
More essential.
Yeah, I don't see any evidence. I mean, it was all in the in the air at the time, but I don't really see any direct reference. It's more philosophical, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, so let's let that go. And the other thing was, you know, this was a period when every certainty, every belief, you know, was just swept aside and
Being
crushed.
challenged. Yeah.
All of the optimism of the 19th century was just crashed as this awful war could come.
Yeah.
And then, you know, a few decades later, it gets worse.
Yeah.
I don't, anybody who was professing certainty back then and not humility about, oh my God, I mean, we just had no idea.
Yes. Yes.
I think that was his point. I wouldn't necessarily advocate humility as a epistemological position, but it certainly helps to reflect once in a while on how bad it all went.
Well,
anyway,
it's interesting because Ecclesiastes, you know, who wrote that piece, you know, the seasons and the time for living, time to die, etc., etc. He also spoke about humility.
I came and I saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, battle to the strong, wisdom to matter of understanding, but time and chance, yeah.
Yes, yes, and so you know, given Eliot's Anglican leanings, you know, he probably studied Ecclesiastes pretty solidly. You know? Yeah.
One of his poems is based on he had gone back to 1682. Were you saying that 1682? And
yes.
And read a sermon by a pastor, and then been inspired to was it one of these poems?
Yes, inspired to go to this church in East Coca. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
This is really grappling with religion, I think, a lot, you know.
Yeah.
Whether it's the answer.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Okay, the third section. Oh, dark, dark, dark. They all go into the dark, the vacant interstellar spaces, the vacant into the vacant, the captains, merchant bankers, eminent men of letters, the generous patrons of art, the statesmen and the rulers, distinguished civil servants, chairmen of many committees, industrial lords and petty contractors, all go into the dark. And dark the sun and moon and the Almanac de Gotha and the Stock Exchange Gazette, the Directory of Directors, and cold the sense and lost the motive of action. And we all go with them into the silent funeral. Nobody's funeral, for there is no one to bury. I said to my soul, be still, and let the dark come upon you, which shall be the darkness of God. As in a theatre, the lights are extinguished for the scene to be changed, with a hollow rumble of wings, with the movement of darkness on darkness. And we know that the hills and the trees, the distant panorama, and the bold, imposing facade are all being rolled away. Or as when an underground train in the tube stops too long between stations, and the conversation rises and slowly fades into silence, and you see behind every face the mental emptiness deepen, leaving only the growing terror of nothing to think about. Or when under ether the mind is conscious, but conscious of nothing. I said to my soul, be still and wait without hope, for hope would be the hope for the wrong thing. Wait without love, for love would be love of the wrong thing. There is yet faith, but faith and the love and the hope are all in the waiting. Wait without thought, for you are not yet ready for thought. So the darkness shall be the light, and the stillness the dancing. Whisper of running streams and winter lightning, the wild thyme unseen and the wild strawberry, The laughter in the garden echoed ecstasy, not lost, but requiring, pointing to the agony of death and birth. You say I'm repeating something I've said before. I shall say it again. Shall I say it again? In order to arrive there, to arrive where you are, to get from where you are not, you must go by a way wherein there is no ecstasy. In order to arrive at what you do not know, you must go by a way which is the way of ignorance. In order to possess what you do not possess, you must go by the way of dispossession. In order to arrive at what you are not, you must go through the way in which you are not. And what you do not know is the only thing you know. And what you own is what you do not own. And where you are is where you are not. So, he's talking about this darkness, and he's beginning to get to the heart of the matter. He's taking the gloves off. The scathing references to soulless and the soulless and the transactional, the to pro forma lives and egoic, self-referential, self-serving selves, and what it costs in selfhood. Cold the sense and lost the motive of action. And we all go with them into the silent funeral. Nobody's funeral, but there's no one to bury. He's speaking here of two kinds of darkness. The darkness of these men listed, lives in separation, egoic lives devoid of the fully integrated, expressed life of passion, purpose, mission, a sense of the miraculous, interdependence and communion with something larger and greater than the embodied false self. And there's another darkness that he's talking about. And he talked about this in Burnt Norton, the darkness that shall be the darkness of God. And he speaks about this darkness quite a lot. And there's an Anglo-Welsh 17th century mystic and metaphysical poet, Henry Vaughan, who in one of his poems, The Night, he speaks of this a deep but dazzling darkness, and it's that dark meditative stillness that comes either at night in solitude or with closed eyes, as in meditation. And I think Eliot's alluding here to this paradox of finding movement, pattern, resonance, and creation through stillness, to become still enough to be present, to be a witness to all that wonder and transcendence that comes with this kind of awareness. We see it here, whisper of running streams and winter lightning, the wild thyme unseen and the wild strawberry, the laughter in the garden echoed ecstasy, not lost, but requiring, pointing to the agony of death and birth. Does anybody have any thoughts on that section? Dee, does this give you any sense of where he was going with this? About humility?
No.
No, okay.
Well, he seems pretty down.
Say that again, Carol.
He seems almost more pessimistic in this section, and he's more specific by giving particular examples of groups of people. So far, I'm still kind of lost in despair.
Yes, yes, yes. And I think he's still hinting at it. He's still hinting at it. He talks about these lines, nobody that there's a silent funeral, nobody's funeral, for there is no one to bury. And I think he's talking about that again in two ways, two meanings, that there's no substantive self in the lives of these people that he's speaking of. And in the first quartet, he talked about, one of the lines was, those who are only living can only die. There's nothing else. There's nothing else there for them. But to go deeper, he's talking about the substance, and so he's talking about, number one, just burying those who are really not living. We're really not living anyway. Mm-hmm. But he's also talking about this essential energy that he's been talking about, this essential movement, as in the stillness of the Chinese jar. What we created and left behind remains. This resonance that continues after our life. You know, this is another reference to the life and history and layers. You know, the ground beneath our feet and the remains, and the still living new life, nurturing new life. But this other meaning to nobody's funeral, for there's no one there to bury, is that there's only the remains. You know, the true self, the true life that existed, the resonance that existed, does not need to be buried. It's been freed. It's not there. It's no longer there, right? So, and some of these references here to the Almanac de Gotha, for example, was a directory of European and British royalty and nobility and high government officials and diplomats and so on. So these are the people he's targeting in this section, I think.
Pauline?
Yeah. Hi, Lee.
Hi. I love this part.
And, good, I'm so glad.
What?
I'm so glad. Go ahead.
Because the last part of he says, I said to my soul, be still.
Yes.
And wait without hope, for hope would be the wrong thing. This is so much about trust.
Yes.
And not having
humility,
any expectation.
And humility, Lee.
Yes. And then he says, for hope would be hope for the wrong thing. It's so beautiful.
Yes, it is.
It's completely, he's as you said, he's completely surrendering. No expectations.
Yes.
I don't want anything. I think it's wonderful.
Yes. And he's existing at this moment in complete emptiness.
Yeah. Wait without thought. You're not ready for thought.
Everything. Yeah.
The darkness shall be the light and the stillness the dancing. I think it's fantastic.
Yes, I do too.
It's absolutely trusting and not worrying about anything.
Yes. Yep.
The soul, the real soul.
Yes. And, you know, this ecstasy and the whisper of running streams, not lost, but requiring and pointing to the agony of death and birth, a necessary piece of our experience.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you, Lee. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that help anybody else out in terms of still seeing it being a downer? Anybody, any thoughts? Okay. So we'll go into the next.
I'm trying to
Yeah, go ahead.
But I keep getting muted.
Oh, okay. I'm not muting anybody. I'm waiting for people to speak. Can you unmute yourself, Walter?
It keeps muting me.
Oh, there
you're
you go.
fine.
There you go. You're off mute now. Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yes, I
It
see.
says mute here.
We can hear you.
Okay, I got it. Mute's what I could do.
Okay.
All right. See, there you go.
It's a possibility. It's
Yeah,
open.
what is a possibility and what isn't a possibility? And it's right on the poem. But on the theory that a poem doesn't mean but be, maybe we could talk for a moment about not what it means, but how it means. But there isn't a line here that doesn't beautifully use assonance and consonance.
Yes.
There isn't, assonance is essentially the rhyming of the vowels, and consonants essentially the rhyming of the consonants.
Yes.
And I'm amazed at Eliot here.
It's gorgeous, isn't it?
Yeah, even if it were otherwise free verse, it would still be verse because this is such an element of that.
Absolutely. And that's why he used the iambic, various iams, to create that flow, to create that.
Yeah, but still, assonance and consonance is a different concept in a way. And I was listening as you spoke, and there wasn't a line that wasn't informed by that technique.
Yes.
And the only other thing I was going to say is make an interesting comparison. William Butler Yeats, who wrote essentially at the same time as Eliot.
I was just thinking Yeats when you said that. Go ahead.
Yeah, he wrote same time. He never wrote a line that sounded like a riddle. You always said, "Oh, I get it."
Yes.
There's a lot beneath it, a great deal beneath it, but it was never like a riddle. And with Eliot, he seems to feel that every line is something of a riddle.
That's right. Yes.
And there are poets, even as we look at poetry groups, that feel that if you simply say something outright, clearly, and definitely, that it's not really poetry, it's not really profound.
Yeah.
Because it should be more like Eliot, and you should say, "Wow, that's wonderful language," but what do you suppose you might be saying?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's just a comparison of different ways poets work.
Right. And then you also get criticism of if there's something obscure, that it needs to be more plain and more readable, for the.
Yeah, I wonder what Eliot's trying to do, because you must realize that for the average reader, this is just going to be all riddles.
That's right. Yeah.
For someone like you, it's wonderful because you can get into it forever and understand it. But for most readers, it's going to be
a very deep dive here. Yeah.
Yeah, and yet, when you go back to Proofrock, there isn't a high school or a college graduate who doesn't think it's the best poem on the face of the earth.
But the subject itself is extremely difficult to grasp.
I guess, yeah.
It's essentially the Buddhist conception of emptiness that he's talking about. He's talking about living in emptiness, living in a deep state of enlightenment, actually.
Yeah, that's always difficult to discuss.
Yeah. How can you discuss that?
Right. Well, he's trying. Right? This is great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. So, okay. So we have another iambic tetrameter poem with a very different tempo. The wounded surgeon plies the steel that questions the distempered part. Beneath the bleeding hands, we feel the sharp compassion of the healer's art, resolving the enigma of the fever chart. Our only health is the disease, if we obey the dying nurse, whose constant care is not to please, but to remind of our and Adam's curse, that to be restored, our sickness must grow worse. The whole earth is our hospital, endowed by the ruined millionaire, wherein if we do well, we shall die of the absolute paternal care that will not leave us, but prevents us everywhere. The chill ascends from feet to knees. The fever sings in mental wires. If to be warmed, then I must freeze and quake in frigid purgatorial fires, of which the flame is roses and the smoke is briars. The dripping blood our only drink, the bloody flesh our only food, in spite of which we like to think that we are sound, substantial flesh and blood. Again, in spite of that, we call this Friday good. So what do you think of them apples? So, Adams, these are basically tetrameter and couplets. A, B, A, B, C, D, you know, it's very simple. And we've cast in each, this poem is really about, we've cast ourselves out of the reality of the garden. This garden in Quartet 1, where the sound of children's laughter was in the foliage, right? The Eden that was in the first poem. We've cast ourselves out of that reality, deaf to the children in the foliage, deaf to the water out of sunlight, the grace and transcendence of echoed ecstasy. And the cure is to leave the garden, right? The cure in this culture is to leave the garden for the hospital so that we can be cured of our illness. We can conform, live in restriction, accept our self-banishment from the garden, you know, in one. And the bird in that garden was a thrush, right? And this is a species that man believes falsifies deceptively because it mimics other birds' song. But it hears what we cannot because of our own false and deceptive projections. And so the disease is health here. The surgeon's wounded, the nurse is dying. The world's a hospital where we're confined, serving, freedom lost, entrapped by paternalistic, spiritually ruined millionaire. And back to Quartet 1, the roses, the symbol of creative dream and fulfillment in action, are aflame. These are our visitors in Eden are now aflame. The mental wires of perception that he referred to in 1 are now fevered. And roses have become the flame of punishment and purgatory for forbidden pleasure. And briars have destroyed our dreams, you know, they're up in smoke. And this scathing and he's scathing here in the sacrificial self-punishment of the celebration of the Christian crucifixion. Our only spiritual food is flesh, blood, pain, entrapment, lost dreams, suffering, thirst, and starvation. So it's a pretty damning criticism, I think, of what we've created as kind of a global culture. Anybody have any thoughts?
Is he coming out against, at the end, is he attacking Christianity, do you think?
That's what I think. I don't know.
It seems to say that
yes.
The only, excuse me, the only way we get off is on, you know, blood and flesh.
Yes, yes.
Yes. That seems, given the context, that seems a rather odd way to end up.
Yes, yes.
I wonder if that's what he means.
And I think there is this conflict for him between East and West, you know, between Eastern and Western ideas of spiritual Anybody, any thoughts, guys?
Pauline, I have a question.
Yeah.
You know how some of the poets were hooked on laudanum or opiate, you know, whatever version of the opiums or alcohol, they were alcoholic, you know, do you know anything? Could he have been, you know, subject to sullen moods? Do we know much about that part of his, like his biochemistry, you might say?
Actually, he talks about that in Quartet 1, in the first quartet, in the first section of the first quartet. In the garden, the lotus rose quietly, and the pool was filled with water out of sunlight. Lotus was sort of it was sort of like a magic mushroom, so, you know, in ancient Greece, right? It was a kind of drug that allowed you to see transcendent, you know, different versions, different layers of reality. So he talks about that in that first stanza, but I'm inclined to think not. I'm inclined to think not. I think he had transcendent experience, but I think it was through meditation and through religious practice, actually. Yeah, that's my sense of it anyway. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Pauline?
Yeah.
So this second paragraph, our only health is the disease. It's a very important spiritual lesson.
It is.
That we can only really become healthy if we recognize what our own, whatever you want to call it, you know, deficiencies or disease, or whatever, you know, where we are really not the best person we can be. If we can't, and that also goes back to humility. If we can't recognize our own illness, there's no chance for cure.
That's right, and that goes back to that line in the last section. We are only undeceived of that which deceiving could no longer harm. You know, seeing that it's a very arcane way of saying it, but it's the same idea, I think. And even the nurse here is dying, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, where does this pessimism come from when Eliot has, as they certainly said at that time, heard the good news?
Yes.
Look at he's converting.
I think that it's coming from his observation of the culture surrounding those years, you know, during and after the war. You know, these years of l'entre-deux-guerres, you know, the years between the wars. But
that was plenty of cause for pessimism. But what about his saying that
you know, the rise of fascism? You know?
Yeah, but then again, he says, you know, his criticism is we can only reach ecstasy through blood and flesh, drinking the blood and the flesh.
I don't think he's saying that at all.
Oh, I thought you said that before.
Oh, okay. No, I don't. No, I think he's criticizing that. Criticizing, you know, Adam's curse. He's criticizing the whole Western religion, the whole basis of Western religion, which is Adam's curse, you know, thrown out of the Garden of Eden.
But is he criticizing the communion as the only thing we can do? It's bloody and fleshy. Is he criticizing the communion?
Well, there is no blood and oh yeah, I understand what you mean. Yeah. The wine and the
yes.
It sounds like it at the end.
I would tend to think he is.
You would think he'd be falling back on his Christianity that he just discovered to answer the horrors of the wars. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah.
Got me.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. This is kind of a mysterious section to me.
It leaves me thinking that things have to get better. I think he's just showing us the full spectrum, you know,
yes,
the range of ecstasy and despair. And this is,
yes,
and he's just, you know, he's plotting and plotting both,
yes,
plotting and
yes.
plotting the reader through those experiences.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you happen to know, Pauline,
Yeah.
what his major work was after this?
None. He didn't. This was his culmination.
This was it. Okay.
Yeah, it was. I don't know if he wrote what he wrote after this.
Sure. Because I was wondering if he
Culmination. Yeah.
if he got somewhere and said hallelujah, but maybe not.
Yes. Yes.
Maybe by
He's
the
not a
fourth
hallelujah kind of guy.
quartet.
He's not a hallelujah kind of guy. No, he's very British. Yeah. Okay. So let's do the last section in this quartet, the last movement. So here I am in the middle way, having had 20 years largely wasted, the years of l'entre-deux-guerres, trying to learn to use words. And every attempt is a wholly new start and a different kind of failure. Because one has only learned to get the better of words for the thing one no longer has to say, or the way in which one is no longer disposed to say it. And so each venture is a new beginning, a raid on the inarticulate with shabby equipment, always deteriorating in the general mess of imprecision of feeling, undisciplined squads of emotion. And what there is to conquer by strength and submission has already been discovered once or twice or several times by men whom one cannot hope to emulate. But there is no competition. There is only the fight to recover what has been lost and found and lost again and again, and now under conditions that seem unpropitious. But perhaps neither gain nor loss. For us, there is only the trying. The rest is not our business. Home is where one starts from. As we grow older, the world becomes stranger, the pattern more complicated of dead and living. Not the intense moment isolated with no before and after, but a lifetime burning in every moment. And not the lifetime of one man only, but of old stones that cannot be deciphered. There is a time for the evening under starlight, a time for the evening under lamplight, the evening with the photograph album. Love is most nearly itself when here and now cease to matter. Old men ought to be explorers. Here or there does not matter. We must be still and still moving into another intensity for a further union, a deeper communion. Through the dark cold and the empty desolation, the wave cry, the wind cry, the vast waters of the petrel and the porpoise. In my end is my beginning. And I think the key to this last piece is the last line, where he twists, he turns the phrase from the beginning of this quartet, in my beginning is my end. And he ends on this note, in my end is my beginning. So we're moving into this much more assertive of a positive movement forward, I think, in this stanza. What does that, anybody have to say anything? Anybody that we haven't heard from?
Oh, she can't hear you.
Hi, Pauline.
Hi, yeah.
I love the last paragraph. Old men ought to be explorers.
Yes, it's gorgeous, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Always learning.
Yes, that's right. That's
we must
right.
be still, and I also love this one. We must be still and still moving. But you have to have both. You have to both, like the solidity and moving.
Yeah, and also still moving into another intensity.
Yeah.
You know, this line, still and still moving into another intensity. Hold on.
For a further union, a deeper communion.
That's it. A further union, a deeper communion. Yes.
So in response to what Walter was saying, I don't think he's depressed at all. I think he's finding some great stuff.
I absolutely agree. And I also think what he's talking about is how old men, and, you know, back in those days, it was all men, but how old people, you know, give up on life and sort of fade away at the end of their lives, instead of still moving into another intensity, you know, preparing, you know, the subtext is keep preparing, keep inquiring, keep exploring for your next incarnation, you know, whatever that may be. Wherever this energy, this life force is going, keep going after it, keep making it happen, you know. And also, when we look at great artists, that's why they live so long, because they've never stopped moving into a new intensity, another layer, another question, another inquiry. You know, Pablo Casals and all those old people whose name escapes me at the moment, but it's really a lesson in staying alive, staying living, you know.
Bee Gees.
Say it again, please.
The Bee Gees, that song.
Oh yeah, staying alive. Yeah. yeah.
I kind of wonder, for your nickel, would you take this statement of it or the statement of Tennyson in Ulysses? Tennyson in Ulysses raises my heart to the highest level. It inspires me, keeps me going. And this makes me think, but it doesn't fill me with energy to go forward.
Yeah. Do you know what? I have a close friend who is always asking, "What's your favorite blah?" You know.
Yeah, right.
And I can never answer that question because I don't have a favorite. You know, I like them for different things. I like them for different.
Oh, I think that's so true. I've been asked that when I've been reading poetry or something, talking.
Yeah.
And I have favorite poets in different moods. If I'm depressed, Eliot can make me feel really, really good because he confirms that, yeah, you're right. Oh boy, you're right. And if I'm really feeling great about things, you know, Yeats or somebody else can make me feel good.
Yeah.
But it's a poet for different moods.
But, you know, oddly enough, I find this four quartets very life affirming. I find it to be one of the great transcendent works, you know, of all time.
Oh, I can get there for sure.
Yeah.
So I need to tell you all something. I feel completely exonerated and exhilarated. And for these lines here, I'm going to say them, I'm going to write them, and they're going to be, you know, Pauline, whenever you write a poem and you have this beautiful thing underneath, like a quote. What's that called again when you have a quote underneath?
Epigraph. Yeah.
Is that the
epigraph?
Right underneath the title.
Yeah.
Underneath the title. Is that called an epigraph? Underneath the title of the poem? Or a
quote?
I
think so.
Quote.
Yeah.
Okay, so here it is. So here it is. Okay, wait, sorry, here it is. One is no, wait, sorry. And so each venture is a new beginning, a raid on the inarticulate,
with shabby
equipment, always deteriorating in the general mess of imprecision of feeling. That sums the whole damn thing up for me. Guys.
Yes. And
that is like, that's the whole Megillah right there.
And also this is a fabulous treatise on creative work.
And so adventurous, a new beginning, a raid on the inarticulate.
Yes.
It's, you know, that which, in other words, I know all of us who are poets, we're constantly trying to articulate the inarticulate. We're raiding the inarticulate.
But you know what? Everybody is doing the same thing. We're in a constant sense of becoming. We're always encountering the stranger within ourselves. And most of us don't listen to that stranger. They don't listen to what that stranger is telling us about where we're going or where we need to go.
And I love that it comes with it, and what we're using is shabby equipment, always deteriorating in the general mess of imprecision of feeling.
Yes.
But that's, how it goes.
Yes. And also this theme begins with, he's beginning to build upon this theme that he's touched directly and indirectly throughout, which is the middle way, which is a pillar of Buddhist philosophy. And the concepts of Buddhist philosophy and Eastern philosophy permeated the poem without reference. But this is the first time he's actually referenced the middle way directly. Mm-hmm. And you get the sense that he's merged his Anglican roots with this more abstract and subtle influences of Eastern philosophy. And
he's revealing that he's doing it because he largely wasted 20 years between two wars. In other words, you look back between 1 and 2 wars, and
however, he created a masterpiece in those 20 years. He created this in between the wars and during the war. But, not surprising for an intellectual of his time, as contemporary Western post-Kantian philosophy owes its origins to the Tibetan Buddhist philosophy of emptiness. So that post-Kantian contemporary philosophy was really coming into focus in this time. And this is rooted in the third way was refined by Nagarjuna, the ancient Buddhist monk, and refined by Je Tsongpa in the 13th century. And this whole set of principles has become the foundation for contemporary philosophy, but also it has deep resonance in the emerging fields of quantum physics and neuroscience and neurobiology, of which in T.S. Eliot's time, this was really at the forefront, these emerging fields of science. And quantum physics and neuroscience and neurobiology actually made discoveries that had already been established in the philosophy of emptiness, about the, assertions about reality, which had already been established. So I think that he's deeply engaged in this here. And so he flips it, in my beginning is my end, and at the end of the poem, in my end is my beginning. And I think that is a pretty optimistic way of ending the poem, don't you think?